Rise! I will give you the greatest games on earth!
Show them you can fight or die trying.
From the producers of 300.
A 4-horse race is a suicide.
Let the games begin!
Starring Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins.
Behold, this arena will be built for Rome.
Rise or die.
Those About to Die. A new Peacock original series streaming July 18th.
It was a major battle that took place in Germantown, just outside Philadelphia, between the British Army, led by Sir William Howe, and the American Continental Army, along with the 2nd Canadian Regiment, under the command of the first ever Commander-in-Chief, George Washington. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, now in its 2nd year from the Weather Network in Canada. The year is 1777. The Declaration of Independence has already been signed, but the British are none too pleased with this turn of events. We are picking up today during the American Revolutionary War, the Battle of Germantown. On this day in weather history. Now, I love stories of how the weather affected important battles in human history. So far on this podcast, we have covered the American Civil War with the deluge of flooding rain, and we discussed the War of Independence and how a hurricane took out ships from the British Navy in Atlantic Canada. Today we hit up how fog did the trick in this battle. The capital of the American colonies at this time was in Philadelphia. So by taking the capital in any war, you obviously have the upper hand. And General Howe had that after a series of battles in 1777. Oh, before I move on, fun fact. This was the first and only time that the capital city of the United States of America has ever been taken over by a foreign power. And again, it was the weather and ingenuity that helped end that streak. Back to the story. With the British keeping 3,000 troops in the capital city to fortify its hold, British General Howe moved an additional 8,000 to Germantown, a city just to the north. General George Washington of the Americans saw this maneuver and sniffed out the strategy, so he had to be cunning if he was to lead an army to take back Philadelphia. So he set to work on a multi-stage plan that would take place overnight. Darkness would be his cover, and it had already worked successfully to secure his victory at Trenton, so he wanted to try it again. The idea, you see, was to surround Germantown with 4 different attack columns, each with thousands of men. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, but oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Everyone was in on this one. 2 battalions were made up of trained militia, and the other 2 support groups consisted of regular foot troops. So essentially, if this was Star Trek, this would equate to the 2 militia in a combination of blue and gold shirts, while the regular foot soldiers were the guys in the red shirts, and we all know what happens to them in every episode. Anywho, even in the dead of night, the plan did not work as effectively as it had been hoped, and the gains simply did not materialize. What to do? Aha! Enter the weather. This actually might be how this lyric made it to the Star-Spangled Banner, but at dawn's early light, on a particularly cold morning of October 4th of 1777, a dense fog began to roll in and became the blanket of protection the colonies needed for a surprise attack to hopefully work this time. With low visibility, one of the 4 attacking columns of soldiers lit a fire as a decoy of activity to deceive the British, while the other 3 marched down various roads into the town, again, while fog draped its way in and around every corner of the city. Then the fighting broke out, and then another problem arose that was not foreseen immediately. The fog thickened and stayed persistent. Good news, right? Not so fast. Now the Americans can't see what's going on. Once the surprise is launched, you have to be able to actually see where the enemy is and where each other are. Also, consider that it would not be until 1884 That's over 100 years from 1777, when inventor Paul Vielle would invent smokeless gunpowder. Therefore, with all this fighting going on, there was a dense cover of fog and gun smoke that would take seemingly forever to dissipate back then. Battalions were going down wrong roads, confusing each other for the enemy, and firing on each other. As a matter of fact, 2 American brigades accidentally ambushed each other before they both retreated, still thinking they were the British. This retreat left another brigade exposed and very easy for the British to take down. What chaos! General Washington, unaware of the overall confusion and lack of communication in the fog, finally had to order a full retreat. The Americans were defeated. Tomorrow is October the 5th. Tomorrow we have a story where some of the largest hailstones in American history fell in a most unlikely state, Arizona. And this hailstorm that we're talking to you about tomorrow cost almost $3 billion. We're going to tell you exactly why that happened, where that happened, and how that happened. Tomorrow, October 5th, this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.